It's 1978, and all is not well in the world. 900 Americans died in the Jonestown Massacre, where the phrase, "drink the Kool-Aid," comes from. And the northeastern United States was fully covered in snow by the Great Blizzard of '78. We lost Keith Moon of The Who, and the strange death of Nancy Spungen, made famous by her boyfriend Sid Vicious, made it a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow. However, it was yet another epic year of movies with Superman, Grease, and Animal House. But this channel is all about the rock music of the year. And this year did not disappoint with one of the greatest debut albums of all time. Another debut full of power pop goodness. And the album that solidified the place of a three-piece Canadian band in the pantheon of rock and roll Hall of Famers. So let's dig in, test the waters, and explore all of the best rock albums of 1978. So in my previous video, I got called out for not including this album in 1977. However, this album came out in 1978, so here it is. I don't think I can stress enough how influential this record is, if for no other reason than Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing. But if I'm talking about that, then I have to mention his brother Alex, steadfast and exciting on the drums, Michael Anthony singing his heart out on background vocals and playing arguably the steadiest bass lines of the upcoming decade. Then to top off all of that, you have the voice of David Lee Roth. But think about this for a second. If you didn't have this record to set everything up, rock of the 80s would have sounded very different. And truth be told, Eddie has his fingerprints all over the aforementioned decade. Eddie's guitar playing is unreal, unbelievable, and in some cases unholy. He plays with the fire of youthful urgency like on Atomic Punk or Eruption. But he has the ability to draw it back and bring it back in with the crazy fun intro of Ice Cream Man. Or even the aggressively played Ain't Talking About Love. But the real standout for me is Runnin' with the Devil. The groove, Roth's banshee yelp at the beginning of the song, the guitar playing, it sounds simple, but just try to play it. See, it's not as easy as it sounds to play it right. We almost got Van Hagar early, though, as the producer of the album, Ted Templeman, and Eddie's lifelong friend starting around this time, didn't like David Lee Roth in the band at all.
No, sir, I don't like it.
And he was nearly convinced to bring in Sammy Hagar, but cooler heads prevailed after he spent some time with him. He wasn't a conventional singer, to be sure, but he had certain gifts that were rare in the rock world, and those assets outweighed his flaws. Ted Templeman, Van Halen producer. I feel like there are perfect, no-skip rock records, but this one might be the exception. It invites you to the party. It asks you to leave your inhibitions at the door and just let it all hang out. It is rock and roll. And Eddie, Alex, Mike, and David, they were the hosts. What do you get when you have a multi-platinum selling artist and his piano? Billy Dang Joel. On his sixth album, 52nd Street, Billy continues to put out absolutely masterful performances captured on tape, with songs like My Life, Big Shot, and the maybe underrated Zanzibar. But the thing is that it was pretty heavily inspired by jazz and the New York club scene. He hired several jazz musicians to bring the songs to life. In fact, It was named 52nd Street as a sort of a literal tribute to the jazz scene of New York City. It was also the first album of Billy's to hit #1 on the Billboard charts, and held on to it for 8 weeks. Phil Ramone would constantly be a presence in the studio and in Billy's life. He helped Billy navigate basically everything that was Billy Joel, and we have him to thank. Okay, this is a hot take, but I feel that Mark Knopfler is up there in the greatest guitarists of all time. On their debut album, Dire Straits just absolutely sizzles. Honestly, the album feels like you walked into a smoke-filled bar. You know the one. Cheap drinks, cheap people. But you stumble in there and you hear the greatest band you've ever heard. But in actuality, the album was recorded on a shoestring budget and a tight time window. The band was unheard of at the time, and we're a few years out from making it big as international MTV stars. Arguably, their one hit from this album, Sultans of Swing, which we reacted to on our other channel, almost became a song that never was. The song was initially ignored by major radio stations. It didn't gain traction until a singular BBC DJ, Charlie Gillett, played it constantly. They actually re-recorded the song because of how much attention it got. But the most astonishing thing, and this is mostly for guitar players, is that Mark doesn't play with a pick. His ability for restraint is featured on the album and became one of the band's defining characteristics. Basically, this was a jumping off point to superstardom for Mark and the boys. And they did it without the flash and pretense of their peers. When you have a rock band who goes down all sorts of fantastical and science fiction-y kind of roads, and you make an album that the entire first side of the record is a continuation of their previous album, you have Rush with their album Hemispheres. They were at their absolute peak of prog goodness at this time, before the mega hit Tom Sawyer. They were knee-deep in their own minds when they recorded this album, with entire movements disguised as songs, such as the first song, Cygnus, X1, Book 2, Hemispheres. Having 6, count them, 6 movements, and then ending the album, La Villa Strangiato, having 12 movements. Who does that? Rush, and Rush alone. Producer Terry Brown has spoken on the technical and physically demanding effort that make up the album. He even brought up that the entire album was done in a key that was exceptionally difficult for Geddy Lee, bass player and vocalist, to sing. And because of that, vocals took 2 weeks to do. That might not sound like a lot now, but back then, it was practically unheard of. Not to mention that the album required several different studios to record it. Even Geddy himself described the perfection needed to record the album. However, after this album, Geddy is quoted saying, "The notes were different, the story was different, but structurally we started feeling like we were repeating ourselves. So we thought, this isn't healthy for us. We've got to break out of that. We needed a new direction, and we found it with Permanent Waves." If you have a day to spend listening to and absorbing a record, I highly recommend Hemispheres, because it will probably take you a full day to understand everything that's going on. When you have a record that is loved by Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones, Slash from Guns N' Roses, Joe Perry from Aerosmith, and Eddie Van Halen, you're doing something right. AC/DC's Powerage was a monolithic album, but it wasn't written for the critics. It was written for the kid in his bedroom rocking out with his air guitar. Powerage is basically a Bon Scott alter. It has all of the swagger without the hits, but it's songs like Gimme a Bullet, Rock and Roll Damnation, which may be the precursor to the massively successful Highway to Hell. Riff Raff, or even the mid-tempo Gone Shootin'. They all had this sort of lyrical whimsy that Scott was famous for, but he most assuredly perfected his flow and reckless abandon on this album. Of course, Angus and Malcolm Young played their normal scalding guitar lines throughout. It's a masterclass on how to play guitar to a ridiculous effect. That's exactly why it was a favorite of all of the guitar players I listed before who loved this album. This was the first record to feature Cliff Williams on bass and backing vocals. However, there was a bit of a kerfuffle with their now former bass player, Mark Evans. But it was a steady bass line that completed the sound. This would be Harry Vanda and George Young's last collaboration with AC/DC as producers. And much like the previous albums, they were able to dig deep into the performances and give us a raw, stripped-down approach. Similarly to every record that they had released thus far, the record came out in Australia first. However, in America, it was released a mere 20 days later. On the surface, Powerage serves as the bridge between Let There Be Rock and Highway to Hell. But if you look deeper, you can see this is a band that was destined to be huge, and this record was a huge step forward in their careers. There are bands who have hits, and there are bands who are respected in the rock and roll business. But the Cars, they seem to have hit at exactly the correct time. They rock, but not in the conventional, at least at the time, sense. They were like your nerdy younger brother. To say this debut was a major success is like saying a kid who sets up a lemonade stand will end up being a CEO of a fruit company. Is it new wave? Is it rock? Is it pop? How about a combination of all three? Rick Ocasek, Benjamin Orr, Elliot Easton, David Robinson, and Greg Hawkes all deliver something special to this band. But more specifically, it's Greg Hawkes' synthesizers that give us something special. They kind of go in and out of the songs like rain, inevitable and piercing. But honestly, it's what they add to the songs that make this album what it is. Especially on Just What I Needed, and Moving in Stereo. Yeah, that scene in Fast Times? Yeah, I really don't need to say anything else. Or even You're All I've Got Tonight. But the other thing is Ocasek and Orr, who deliver vocals biting and sardonic, they are laughing at, or at the very least mocking, everything about love, life, and everything in between. But one thing's for certain, Ocasek especially romanticized women. That was a mix between longing and I don't careism. Put that into sort of a prog meets new wave sound, add up-tempo drums, and you have the Cars. It's actually insane that they made it work. Produced by Roy Thomas Baker of Queen fame, who was known for his twiddling of the knobs and layering track after track after track. Elliot Easton was quoted talking about the clearness that Baker was able to achieve, saying that he was able to get real balls, but with clarity. What's insane to me is that they would inspire another band who had a member who went to Harvard. Rivers Cuomo of Weezer would actually get his dream producer in Rick Ocasek to produce their huge debut, the Blue Album. Much like Van Halen, the Cars were able to set up the next decade, albeit earlier than almost anyone else. Fresh off of suing his manager who wanted him to record a live album, the boss settled into his hometown of Holmdel, New Jersey, and wrote about 40 to 70 songs. You know, the simple thing to do. He went into Atlantic Studios in New York City, and it was a nightmare from day one. So he moved the entire operation to the Record Plant Studios to get a more favorable sound out of the E Street Band. And the boss was still unsatisfied. which led to many months of tinkering around with guitar sounds, drum sounds, and practically everything else. He would later write about this in saying, "As with Born to Run, our recording process was thwarted by our seeming inability to get the most basic, acceptable sounds. It's tough being a perfectionist, right?" The entire album is about everyday humans beating the odds, and the boss is the conduit. But the funny thing is that this album, it was partially inspired by the rise of punk rock, but Springsteen took it a step further and created classics in his own voice. The result is an album chock full of punk-infused ideals, but told through the lens of classic rock and folk. It's absolutely mwah, chef's kiss. And here we have yet another album that took something from punk and punk-adjacent music. Some Girls has punk moments, but it also has typical Rolling Stones moments. Fresh off of Keith's heroin addiction, and the critics saying that the Rolling Stones were slipping, Some Girls is essentially the Rolling Stones' comeback record. And in some ways, it's the last Stones record to be considered dangerous. Honestly, I personally feel this was the last time the Stones were hungry. They wanted to record a record that was dirty, chaotic, and raw. And if you look at the track list for this record, it's pretty varied. But the absolute star of this record, which goes against what I just talked about, is Beast of Burden.
I'll never be your beast of burden.
It's a low-profile, easygoing rocker. It isn't a punk rock leaning statement. It isn't a disco song. It's just a song. A vulnerable track that still sounds somewhat modern. Quiet is the new loud. Essentially, the Stones needed this album to preserve their legacy. And preserve it they did, with the fury and vulnerability for the ages. So by this point in their career, Blondie was still young and looking to make waves. They had moderate success with their previous albums, their self-titled debut, and then Plastic Letters. But it was Parallel Lines that took their star and shot it into the sky. Based out of New York City, they cut their teeth at CBGB's, the same place that broke the Ramones, the Talking Heads, and television, amongst others. They were the runt of the litter in this scene. Enter in Mike Chapman, the producer who was responsible for The Sweet and Suzi Quatro, who were huge acts in the UK. He was convinced that Blondie had pop overtones to them, and he would be the person that could get that out of them. But as he says, "My first intention was to clean the bloody band up." And he did. They spent 2 solid months at the Record Plant Studios in New York City over the summer of '78. Chris Stein, the guitarist, said, "He whipped us into shape. It was like bodybuilding." What Chapman was able to do was to produce no less than 6 singles from that album alone. Picture this. I'm Gonna Love You Too. Hanging on the Telephone. Heart of Glass. Sunday Girl. And lastly, One Way or Another. Two of these songs, One Way or Another and Heart of Glass, would literally go on to be crazy huge. And through all of this, in true New York fashion, they couldn't stand each other. But I think the best part about this record is that it would end up being in the National Recording Registry, a division of the Library of Congress. I mean, think about it. From the sewers of mid-70s New York City to the Library of freaking Congress. Incredible. And honestly, I feel like that without their producer, Mike Chapman, none of it would be possible. I may be biased, but this band's debut album has the complexity of a band that is far ahead in their years. The Police, Andy Summers, Sting, and Stuart Copeland. They hold a very special place in my heart. I'm pretty sure they also hold a special place in yours as well. Originally inspired by Jamaican dub and the beginnings of punk rock, the Police felt they could push their own music further. And they even dyed their hair blonde, mostly to appease the punk rock folks in London. Sting himself was quoted as saying, "The truth is, we liked the energy of punk, but we couldn't really be a part of it. One of our problems was we were quite good at playing our instruments. That was definitely a handicap. You were supposed to have just come off the streets, having never played a bass or sang before." Fair enough, Gordon. In nearly everyone's music collection, this record is often up there if they're into new wave. And the songs, my God, the songs. This album starts off with an absolute banger in Next to You.
I can't stand it for another day.
Then we move on to So Lonely.
So lonely, so lonely.
Next is probably the song on this album, which is Roxanne.
Roxanne.
And lastly, Can't Stand Losing You,
Yes, you call it cowardice, but I'm not prepared to go.
which Sting said he wrote the lyrics in about 5 minutes. It's a heck of a debut, but it's even more than that. It's a weird mingling of Jamaican music with punk rock that would eventually go on to influence multiple bands over the course of the next 40 years. Well, there they are, the 10 best, in my opinion, rock records of 1978. Do you agree with my choices? Do you want to fight me in a dark corner somewhere? What record would you rather I have included in my list? Let me know down below in the comments. And as always, folks, always remember to rock on.